Earlier today, I had so much praise for Saber Astolfo. Now we have to talk about the original Rider version, which technically does have some better use if your account is a bit newer. If you have a more established account and you're still using Astolfo, you just really like Astolfo. I mean, that's really the only reason you'd still be using the Rider version over any of the other Riders you've probably pulled over the history of playing your account. Because I'm not going to sugarcoat it, this guy is not very good. Not completely unusable, mind you. He does have some things going for him. In particular, his NP is quite interesting and his third skill is rather good. It's just more that his first and second skill are going to need a bit of work to carry the rest of his kit. And by the rest of his kit, I kind of mean his hits, because his hits are not very good. He's definitely a year one servant, as we'll get into in just a little bit here, as this is going to be more of a standard servant review instead of an evaluation, as I don't really think I've done a video on the normal Rider Astolfo on the channel. So get comfortable, strap in, make sure you drop a like on the video, considering subscribing, especially if you like that daily FGO content, and also leave your thoughts in the comments down below, but only after we've discussed this unit and what he can do. So let's just dive right into Astolfo, starting off with his hits. And yeah, he is rocking a triple quick deck. For what reason, I have no idea. During year one, this is what assassins were rocking, but for some reason they thought, you know what, let's just go ahead and make Astolfo a star genning character for whatever reason. But hey, at the very least, when the quick chain update comes out for anniversary, where quick chains drop 20 stars now instead of 10, I guess he'll be a little bit better for that, I suppose. But unfortunately, he didn't really get the year one treatment that, say, Okita and Jack got as quick servants, where they gave them monstrously high NP gain, because he only has 0.66, and they also gave them very high hit quick cards, either being 5 or 6 respectively. He only has 2, and doesn't even have that many on his arts card. He's only got 2, and hey, even his extra attack is looking kind of pathetic. You know, the 5-hit extra attack is the standard over here on the ZTL channel. As to the uninformed, it is a composite card that gens stars, NP, and does big boy damage. But only having 4, man, you're just going to have to level up the append skill to even get this to being a fraction as good of a 5-hit extra attack, which is actually probably not true, but for the bit, it's very funny. So let's just see if any of his skills can salvage this servant. You know, maybe, as I mentioned, his NP being quite good and his third skill being pretty decent, maybe that can save him. And we look at his first skill, and oh boy, it is a 1-turn buff. 28% attack for 1 turn on a whopping 5-turn cooldown. Well, at least the cooldown is kinda short, so maybe you could fire this semi-consistently. And 28% attack isn't the worst buff in the world, I suppose. I mean, whenever somebody gives themselves a self-attack buff nowadays, it is usually around 30%, so maybe in the future they'll give this the 3-turn treatment, bump the percentage up to 30%, and maybe they'll even consider throwing on a quick buff, you know, a 30% quick buff for 3 turns as well. Maybe that could help his damage out a little bit, because Lord knows he needs the damage buff. Shifting gears over to his second skill, this is technically survivability, I suppose. It's a 90% chance to stun one enemy for 1 turn, which, you know, is fairly good chances until you remember that has to factor in with debuff resistance and, you know, Goddess Core, all these random passive skills that servants are going to have. So this not being a guaranteed 100% stun is a little yikes, but it might be able to help you out if you're bringing Astolfo to some type of meme setup. Maybe you can get that stun to pop off and buy your party an extra turn. But do also keep in mind, it is on an ungodly 8-turn cooldown. Please buff this, make the stun chance guaranteed, cut the cooldown down by 2 turns, and then maybe throw in, say, a quick resistance down or a quick crit buff, something along those lines to please help him out. You guys probably can see, even as newer players, that the first and second skill are really not all that great. But the third skill, all right, this is actually where we can start talking about Astolfo being fairly decent, because he does admittedly have a 65% chance, and these are all separate procs, to give himself 10 stars every single turn for 5 turns, a 50% buff to his star generate for 5 turns, and a 40% crit damage buff for 5 turns. which I get can be a little bit upsetting, but you probably could manipulate this with a future buff that, say, Skahawk got on her second skill that gives her the buff success rate. You could do something like that for Astolfo on his first and second skill to guarantee that he gets all of these things, because him being, say, a decent crit damage servant wouldn't actually be all that bad. Because again, like say someone like Morgan, who at NP1 doesn't have the highest, damage, she can still do some pretty nasty crits. Same thing for Tomalancer, who we talked about yesterday. Even though her base NP damage isn't the craziest, you can still do some quite nasty crits. And the same thing could be true for Astolfo, but the problem is that it is not guaranteed. And 65%, that's really not it. That's not even like the 80% that Imperial Privilege has. It's not a very good chance. Granted, they're all separate procs, but you kind of want all of them to go through for this to be a decent skill. I mean, at the worst, you would like the star regen, and at best, you really want the crit damage. You really want them to actually be able to profit off the stars that he's going to be able to make. Because admittedly, when we do get the quick chain buff, missing out on the star regen and the star rate is not going to be as bad, because you'll be at least guaranteed 20 stars every quick chain. And so being able to take advantage of that with a 40% crit damage buff would be nice. The best thing on this skill is the guaranteed 50% battery, which I have no idea why they gave him a 50% battery. Just could not tell you. I mean, he definitely needs it to get to his NP quicker, but it does help newer players out that you have this guy who's pretty cheap to upgrade that has a 50% battery, and if you pull maybe an extra copy or two of him, can do some fairly decent damage as a wave clear for you. Or if you need to bring him in as a boss killer, his NP does pierce defense, which is admittedly very good, and it does give him 3 hits of evasion that are not turn-based, very similar to, say, Lancer Ku, who just gives himself 3 free dodges on a skill. This is on an NP, and then it also bombs 10 to 30 stars depending on overcharge level. So again, also if you miss out on the third skill star regen, at least you do get some stars when firing the NP. And again, admittedly, the NP is fairly good. The 3 guaranteed dodges does give him very decent survivability, and piercing defense is always going to be very valuable to have. But we really just got to do something about that first and second skill. Again, I think the easiest way to make Astolfo way better overnight is, say, go to his first skill, make the attack buff 30% for 3 turns, make a quick buff that is 30% for 3 turns, and then also slap on, say, for 1 turn, you have a guaranteed 35% increase in your buff success rate. That way you could immediately fire the third skill right after that, get the NP, get some crit damage, get some star regen, and he would be a bit more decent. Again, still wouldn't be very crazy. You can't really use him as a looper because he has 1 hit on an AoE quick NP with only 0.66% NP gain. He's going to need a lot more than just a 50% battery. Maybe you toss him another 50% battery, and then you could just raw NP farm. But I don't really think we need to make Astolfo competing with all the other quick loopers. Clearly, it's going to take a lot for him to even get to being a fraction as good as someone like Dante's when it comes to looping. So instead of doing that, just help him be a solid option for newer players. You pull Astolfo, and you're excited because you really liked Apocrypha, maybe you like Astolfo himself, for whatever reason, you're super gassed, but then you find out that he's kind of got this mishmash kit of a very strong NP, in theory, a really strong third skill, and then a first and second skill that have decent effects on him, but because of their turn restrictions and kind of just lack of other effects, his kit doesn't really work super well. In that case, you're going to be a little bit disappointed. I would like these to be solid options for newer players, or if your favorite character is Astolfo, that you just have the ability to use him. FGO is one of those games that I think you can realistically make any servant work. Anybody from C to EX tier, you can realistically get them to clear most content in the game. If you have the strong enough supports to kind of push them through that. Again, that's more of the supports doing more of the work than the actual DPS, but you can still say, oh, I cleared this fight with Tomalancer, or I cleared this fight with Saber Astolfo, right? Like a servant that's not considered to be top tier, but maybe your favorite, you can still get the job done with them, which is what I would like to see done with Astolfo. So that's just kind of my take at the end of this, that he's not super great. He's not beyond saving. We could definitely fix him up and make him a more usable servant. It's just a matter of will they? I don't know. It seemed like the Learning with Manga campaign was one of the better times to go ahead and drop a buff for him, but they just decided not to for whatever reason. I don't know why they decided not to, but hey, maybe during a New Year's campaign, maybe during an anniversary campaign, they'll beef up Astolfo for a little bit and make him at least a bit more usable, as those are really the buffs that make me the most excited during anniversary, is the ones that either take a servant from pretty much obscurity and making them very meta, like Saber Alter. I was very excited for that one, or one that's a very promising step in the right direction. And so hopefully Astolfo will get one of those during anniversary or New Year's, but let me know in the comments down below what you think. And if you've used Saber Astolfo or Rider Astolfo, as we talked about the other one earlier today, if you've used any of them for any interesting clears, you know what? Let me know that down in the comments down below as well. Maybe you brought Astolfo and had him beat up Goetia. You know, who knows? Who knows? Maybe you're just really goofing around. You're like, you know what? I'm going to bring one of the meme servants to just floob all over Goetia. But with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace. Late, guys.